Guys, what's up? Brian Bott here from Sports Advantage in Verona. 2018, we're making a commitment to not only our clients, our members, but also strength and conditioning coaches, performance coaches across the country to really share information, try and help answer questions that many people have through their training progressions and whatnot. So we're putting together a group of videos that we're going to put up where people can find different questions that we've been asked or ask questions to us via our Instagram accounts, our Twitter, our Facebook, via email, however you want to do it, and we'll answer those questions the best we can. Now we're going to use our 4 years plus of experience through Sports Advantage here. Also, many of us were collegiate strength and conditioning coaches and are going to share those experiences. So again, our goal is to provide as much content to really help the strength and conditioning field as well as the training community that we have. So the major question that we're going to take in today, all right, is in-season training. All right, and in-season training, unfortunately, is not only the most important time for an athlete, but also the toughest to train. Okay, you have to deal with practices. You have to deal with school for most of them. You have to deal with having to get up early, with lack of sleep, with finals, things like that. So having a sound foundation as you go into your in-season training is very important. And what I want to tackle today is mistakes that I've seen that a lot of coaches will make for various reasons, and I want to share kind of how we tackle them when we were as college strength coaches, and some other things. Okay, so I want to get to it right here. The first major mistake is mobility and stability. Obviously, for athletes, this is the key. Okay, if you can't move, if you can't bend, if your joints aren't stable, at some point injury is going to occur. And unfortunately, many regulating bodies have limited the time that athletes can train. Okay, so as strength coaches, we try and get as much as we can out of our athletes every time they come into our facility, into your gym, whatever it is, okay? And so a lot of times this component, the mobility and the stability and flexibility of the athletes, gets lost in season because we don't want to manipulate their time, and we think that that kind of falls on the back burner, where essentially that in season may be one of the most important components of training. Okay, as a strength and conditioning coach, when I'm dealing with an in-season athlete, at least 1/3 of their time spent with me is focusing on this topic. So in other words, if I have a 60-minute training session, 20 minutes of that session is going to be geared towards tissue integrity, whether it's foam rolling, lacrosse ball, self-myofascial release, whatever it is. Mobility, okay, working through ranges of motion. Corrective exercise, we play it in there. Again, as athletes go through their season, all right, they're held in positions, okay, that aren't full ranges of motion. We can use a linebacker, for example. Linebackers will stand kind of in an athletic position, but they're also shortened down. So we need to make sure that our athletes, before they train, are put into that range of motion that we want them to. They maintain the full range of motion that we work so hard in the summer. If he was a football player, I'm sure many of you are working really hard on their mobility and stability and whatnot in the summer. We don't want to lose that component, because at the end of the day, if they're not working through a full range of motion, both on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever it is, okay, injury is just around the corner. And again, in season is the last time we want to have our athletes injured, because they miss playing time, they miss practice time, and again, you only get so many chances at those things. So again, 1/3 of your time needs to be spent in that area of training. All right. The second major mistake I see is everybody trains the same. Okay, and that's a real easy way for a strength coach to get through his in-season training. Is, you know, you have your 15 or 20 basketball players, your softball players, you know, your track athletes, everybody's doing the same program. And quite frankly, that's pretty lazy. Okay, that's a pretty lazy way to go about it. And, you know, if we're talking about high school, we'll talk about high school and college. If we're talking about high school athletes, all high school athletes are developmental in nature. Okay, they're still continuing to get stronger, even if they're seniors. All right, and we have to look at the amount of time they actually spend on the court, on the field. We have to look at the amount of times the amount of reps they're getting in practice, and then also look at the amount of reps they're getting in games. If they're not playing a lot in a game, you need to revamp kind of what you're doing with them in season and make sure that you're continuing to develop them. If a guy's getting, or a girl, either one is getting significant minutes, on the field, then we have to adjust their training program accordingly. So it takes a lot more than just writing a program because they're a basketball athlete and this is what basketball players do in season. It takes actually talking to the head coach. It takes talking with your athletic trainer. It takes looking at the age of the athlete. Okay, a 15-year-old football player who may happen to make the varsity as a freshman can't be trained the same as your senior athlete that's a varsity player if they're playing the same position. So you really have to take more inventory than just writing the program because he plays on the offensive line, or because he or she's a point guard, or because so-and-so is a pitcher. Okay, it takes a lot more than that. When we talk about college athletes, okay, this becomes actually a little bit easier, okay, because most college athletes are going to be one sport athlete. About 90 to 95% of your athletes are going to be one sport athlete. You are going to get some carryover athletes, but let's assume for this discussion today that we're talking about one sport athlete, okay? They have the in-season time, okay? We'll use football as the example. From August 1st till December 31st, they're in season, all right? We know as strength coaches that the kids that redshirt aren't going to play, okay? So typically, a lot of strength coaches have your redshirt lifting program, and then they have your non-redshirt lifting program. The unfortunate thing are the guys kind of in the middle that are getting lost. All right, your red shirts aren't playing. Your two deep, your guys that are getting significant minutes in practice and in games are getting a certain lifting program, which would be your in-season model. The guys that are missed are still the guys that aren't playing, okay? You may have a freshman that redshirted last year, okay, and now he's a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore, and he's still not getting any minutes. Well, at the end of the day, it's still your job as a strength coach to continue to develop him. But if you're lifting him the same as, if you have a DB who's a freshman and a senior DB, and one kid's not getting any reps and one kid's getting all the reps, well, you're not preparing for your future. And you're not giving this kid the opportunity to prepare for maybe the next spring ball where a guy leaves and he can step into that role. So we have to create programs based on the amount of time that your kids are playing in season. So you can't just go by everybody does the same stuff model. Quite frankly, that you're not going to develop a program. You may develop your team for a year, but you're not going to develop a successful program that continually regenerates players, continually develops players. I mean, there's some programs that their philosophy is they want their kids to play the best when they're seniors. And at the end of the day, that means they're a 5-year, 4-year development program, which means that we have to continue to look at the amount of time athletes are getting during the season in order to generate their lifting program. Third thing, and it's a word that drives me nuts, and it's the word maintain. And you can walk up to any high school coach, any majority of college coaches, and say, what is your goal for your in-season program? Well, I want to maintain, right? Okay, so if we look at the definition of maintain, all right, it's doing the same before as after, okay? So typically, most programs will test before they're in season to kind of validate their strength program, to look at kids that have made gains in the weight room. It could be things from conditioning standpoint to power output, any certain thing, body composition, things like that. When we talk to strength coaches, a lot of times we hear, well, we want to maintain. Okay, well, if I come and I test a kid and he bench presses 315 pounds, and we're going to use just kind of standard numbers here. He bench presses 315 pounds before he enters the season, all right? Typical strength program, it's, guy comes in twice a week, 30 minutes, he kind of throws some stuff around in the weight room and he gets out, because we just want to maintain. We don't want to push them too hard. We just want to maintain where they're at, okay? Then at the end of the season, he's probably benching about 275, all right? That's not maintaining where they're at. To maintain where that kid is at, he needs to bench press 315 pounds after that last game. And at the end of the day, the reason why the majority of your athletes are not maintaining your strength is because you're not pushing them hard enough in the weight room. Kids need to get pushed in the in-season in a smart, educated way, okay? In a smart, educated way, which means it's okay if they push heavy weight. You just don't want them doing a lot of reps, all right? I know when I was a strength coach in college, we used to cycle in and out, okay, of really heavy squatting and really heavy benching. The only thing we did is we didn't do them all in the same week. Okay? And a lot of times coaches get caught in this straight linear periodization. You know, they start with high reps at the beginning of the year and they work to low reps. Well, by the time the season goes on and on, kids start to get worn down. All of a sudden, that heavy weight that they were used to pushing at the end of the summer or right before the season started, putting that in their hands feels like the last thing they want to do. But if we can find a way, if you can find a way with your kids to continually have that heavy load in their hands throughout the entire season, by the time the season's done, you can maintain. We had situations when I was at Wisconsin where we had kids squat more than they did at the end of the summer program going into our 11th or 12th game of the year. So we literally had guys PR in the back squat, all right, that played every game from an offensive line standpoint going into our last 2 games of the year, okay, because we pushed heavy loads in our compound movements or our major strength component movements, okay? And the other thing, which leads into number 4, is many coaches program too much volume, okay, in the weight room. The last place you want to start fatiguing kids and putting volume into your program is in compound movements in the weight room during the season. They get a ton of volume on the practice field or on the court or on the ice or however you want to dictate it. So adding more volume to an already pre-fatigued athlete could be one of the worst things you can do for them to, quote unquote, maintain or develop their strength. So when we say too much volume, coming in, doing sets of 8, sets of 10, you know, consistently doing that volume, that's just breaking that athlete down a little more. Now, is volume needed? Yes. So where do we place it? Philosophically, my experience tells me that in order to maintain strength from our compound movements, we have to push heavy weight, okay? In order to maintain body armor, okay, or lean muscle mass, there has to be some volume. So how we do it is more in a circuit fashion, okay, with our auxiliary exercises, okay? It does a couple things. One, like I said, it helps maintain that body armor that a lot of kids need in sports, helps maintain lean muscle mass. 2, it helps with number 1, because you're forcing them in multiple movements to go through full ranges of motion, okay? 3, it actually can act therapeutical, okay, for the athlete as he goes through. Comes through, he's pretty sore. We go through a 4 or 5 circuit routine with a lot of different movements, okay, a little higher volume. Make sure they're sweating. Nothing that's going to put them in a scenario where they're going to walk out of the weight room feeling worse than they did before. Okay, typically athletes walk out and they feel a lot better. Okay, so kind of in closing, again, mobility and stability is the foundation for all athletes. Okay, if you can't move, you can't play. All right, and so we're constantly making sure athletes, and again, we talked about through here, even through the workout, we're having them stretch, do stretches in between, hip flexor stretches, shoulder stretches, anything from the major joints that we can do to maintain that hip mobility or that mobility, stability, things like that. 2, making sure your training programs are a little more specific to the needs of each individual athlete. Okay, I'm not talking about creating 100 individualized programs, but at the end of the day, looking at the amount of time they're playing, looking at their scenario, looking towards their future, that's your job as a strength coach. Number 3, maintain. In order to maintain, you have to do what you did at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year. So you have to push some load around. Okay, that doesn't mean every single time you come in there you max out. It has to be something that's programmed and periodized. But at the end of the day, in order to maintain max strength efforts, you have to train maximally at some point during your season. Lastly, understand where your volume comes from. Okay, and again, that also comes from watching practice. Okay, and I'll use the offensive line as an example. What do they do all practice on? Punch, 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 punch. So if I bring them in the weight room and all I do is press, 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 at some point you're looking at some possible shoulder injury because they're overdeveloped up front, underdeveloped in the back. Okay? So again, understanding where your volume comes from in practice, offsetting it in the weight room to make sure, again, that your athlete is safe, healthy, and can make it through the season, have a great, successful season. So again, I hope all this stuff helps. Again, from my professional perspective, these are the things that worked for me. These are the things that work for me and my staff at Sports Advantage with training our in-season athletes. And again, if you have questions, on the bottom you'll have my email address. And the last thing, for athletes out there, In-season training is the most important time to train. You can put in all the work you want, all right, during the summer, during the off season. If you neglect training during the season, all right, you will see your performance drop, your energy levels drop, and your confidence will drop, okay? It isn't easy. It's not something everybody likes to do. But at the end of the day, you want to be a great athlete, okay? Training during the season will provide you the benefits you need to kind of reach that next level, okay? Appreciate your attention. Thanks.